For decades, public health messaging has hammered home a single, highly specific number. If you want to protect your heart, you need to exercise for exactly 150 minutes a week. We see this target everywhere, including directly in clinical presentations like this one. The red text highlights the official recommendation: 150 to 300 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic exercise each week. It is prescribed as the baseline defense against cardiovascular disease and mortality. But an analysis of more than 17,000 adults in the UK Biobank study revealed a sobering reality. Hitting that 150-minute mark only drops your cardiovascular risk by about 8 to 9% compared to doing nothing at all. To understand why that number is so low, we have to look at the other side of the equation. Before we can optimize an exercise routine, we have to address the biological reality of modern life. Humans sit for most of the day. Look at this chart mapping heart failure risk against daily hours spent sitting or lying down. The risk remains relatively stable for the first few hours, but the moment the average daily sedentary time crosses 10.6 hours, the line spikes sharply upward. At this specific threshold, the likelihood of heart failure and cardiovascular mortality accelerates. Now, notice what happens to this graph when a person successfully hits their 150-minute weekly exercise goal. The elevated risk line stays almost exactly where it is. 2.5 hours of moderate movement on a treadmill cannot mathematically erase the damage of sitting for nearly 11 hours a day. Treating 150 minutes as a finish line leaves the heart exposed to the heavy biological toll of prolonged inactivity. So, if 150 minutes of basic aerobic activity doesn't offer total protection, what specific types of biological stress does the cardiovascular system actually require? The first missing ingredient is often left entirely out of traditional cardio routines: resistance training. This bar chart measures baseline cardiovascular risk. When researchers factored in individuals who engaged in just 30 to 60 minutes of muscle-strengthening activities each week, like lifting weights or using resistance bands, morbidity risk dropped by 17%. The second highly effective ingredient, particularly for populations that spend all day sitting, is high-intensity interval training, or HIIT. This animation illustrates endothelial function, the ability of the inner lining of your blood vessels to expand and contract dynamically. Sedentary behavior makes these walls stiff. Pushing the heart rate to near maximum capacity in short, intense bursts actively forces these vessels to dilate, repairing their flexibility and reducing overall arterial stiffness. A truly protective dose of exercise requires actively loading the muscles and deliberately spiking the heart rate. It requires varied types of physical stress, not just checking a box for time. Of course, asking someone to lift weights, perform high-intensity intervals, and manage daily cardio while working a full-time job presents a massive logistical hurdle. How does an average person fit all of this into a standard 168-hour week? The easiest entry point bypasses the gym entirely and relies on a metric you can track on your phone: the daily step count. A comprehensive review of wearable tracker data published in the Lancet Public Health Journal mapped daily step counts to longevity. Compared to a baseline of 2,000 steps, individuals who accumulated just 7,000 steps a day recorded a 25% lower risk of cardiovascular disease. And for those whose work week simply does not allow for a daily routine, the data supports another highly effective schedule: the weekend warrior approach. A Harvard study analyzing nearly 90,000 people tracked individuals who crammed their entire weekly exercise volume into 1 or 2 days over the weekend. The results showed a 27% lower risk for heart attacks, nearly identical to the benefits seen in people who worked out every single day. The cardiovascular system does not care how you map out your calendar. Whether you accumulate strain in 10-minute bursts throughout the week or 2 exhausting hours on a Saturday, your heart only cares that the total volume of work gets completed. If we know the types of strain required and the flexibility we have to achieve them, it leads to one final question: what is the absolute optimal duration of weekly movement? This dose-response curve maps out exactly how much protection we get for every minute of activity. The British Journal of Sports Medicine tracked this data, showing that while 150 minutes nets an 8% risk reduction, the curve climbs aggressively from there. To achieve a massive 30+% drop in cardiovascular risk, the target peaks at roughly 600 minutes a week. that number sounds completely unachievable until we divide it by 7. 600 minutes a week breaks down to about 85 minutes of movement a day. And crucially, the researchers point out that this 85-minute daily dose is not a single continuous workout. It encompasses all moderate-intensity physical activity. That includes a dedicated gym session, but it also includes brisk walking, taking the stairs, sweeping the floor, and working in the garden. Reaching this peak level of heart health means moving away from the idea of doing a 30-minute workout and instead designing an inherently active daily lifestyle. You might be wondering, if 600 minutes is great, does pushing to 1,200 minutes make your heart invincible? Researchers at UT Tyler looked at extreme high-volume exercisers who routinely log more than 6 times the recommended guidelines. They found that these massive volumes of training did not lower coronary artery disease risk any further than moderate intermediate exercise. In fact, these extreme athletes still exhibited markers of coronary atherosclerosis, stubborn plaque building up inside the artery walls, proving that intense exercise does not grant immunity from internal cardiovascular disease. So, if the extremes offer diminishing returns, where does the average person get the absolute highest biological return on their investment? We have to look back at the very beginning of the dose-response curve. The single steepest, most dramatic drop in cardiovascular risk occurs the moment a person transitions from a completely sedentary state to engaging in just 20 minutes of activity a day. You don't have to train like an elite marathoner to protect your heart. You simply have to break the 10.6 hours sitting threshold, stand up, and take that very first step.